We're back here, whole 9 yards, on a Thursday afternoon, not in the podcast studio today because the weather. So we're just going to get straight into a bunch of stuff that happened over the past week. I think the biggest news is Wentz was traded. It was for a third round and a second round. And I believe the second round turns into a first if Wentz makes the playoffs and plays 75% of the snaps. I believe that was
Uh,
that was the condition.
he just has to play 75%. He doesn't have to make the playoffs. I mean, there's two
Okay.
things to it. There's two things. So he could rather just play 75% of their snaps, or he could play 70% and then make the playoffs. And then it would turn into a first round pick also. So I guess either way, but I'd assume if you're playing 70%, you're probably playing 75% of the snaps. So as long as he plays 75%, it turns into a first rounder.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think my initial reactions to the trade is I would say it's basically a win-win. I mean, if it's the most you could have gotten for Wentz as the Eagles, then you take it. I think I'm not exactly sure, what's happened over the past month for the Eagles. I'm not sure if it's, if it was a plan to, try to build the price on Wentz, or if it was just because they're totally undecided on him. I would assume they were decided on Wentz. They wanted to get rid of him, and then everything since then has been let's try to build value on him and see what we can get. If that was the plan, then I think they did a good job, and I think this was probably the most you were going to get for him. Um, if not, then that is pretty concerning, just because the Eagles have absolutely no idea what they're doing, and at the time when they fired Peterson, it seemed like they had to choose between Peterson and Wentz, and they chose Wentz. And then they hire Sirianni, who is basically just a nobody knew him candidate, which is not necessarily a problem, but it it seemed a little bit weird. It seemed a little bit odd. And then they trade Wentz, which is to me was surprising because I thought it was, they're hiring Sirianni. He might not be the top candidate, but he was totally sold on, him and Wentz. And then, you know, that was it. That was going to be your coach quarterback combo for 10 plus years. And now they're trading Wentz, and I'm not too sure. My if Sirianni, anyone assumed he was going to be with Wentz, that is bad. Then he's going to be fired after like 2 years. Because he's just set up for failure if that's the case. But I don't think it was the case.
Well, I feel like it was somewhat the case because, like, when they fired we kind of talked about this before. When they fired Peterson, it seemed like they were just going to go with Wentz to be like, it was either Peterson or Wentz who were going to keep, and they seemed like they were going to keep Wentz. And then they hired Sirianni, who, you're right, like no one really expected him to get hired. No one even really knew who he was. But he came from Frank Reich, so that's like an immediate connection between Wentz and someone who's there to keep him there. But I don't think it would have mattered whoever they would have hired. I think Wentz just wanted out, and he was just done with the Eagles, and that was clearly what happened because you're right, he was traded. So I don't think that that situation could have been saved by anything. I don't think any coach or any player honestly could have really helped that. So I think this was the ultimate destination for Wentz, was that he was going to be out of Philadelphia, and really the only team that uh, could have gotten him and did get him was the Colts. And we talked about it before, but like I said, when Stafford got traded and the Colts missed out on him, then they had to get Wentz, and they did, and they only gave up a third round pick and then again a second round pick that is most likely going to become a first round pick. But I think for someone with that talent, that if you can unlock it again, I think that's completely worth it. And with this trade, if he can be 80% of what he was in like 2018, even not even 2017 is almost MVP season, like 2018 when he came back. Then I think they were 11-5 last year with Philip Rivers. I think they could easily be 11-5, maybe even 12-4, especially in that division, if he can be like 80% of what he used to be, which I don't think that's out of the question. So
I definitely don't think it's out of the question. I mean, with Wentz, I think this team becomes, I think it's Kansas City, then probably Buffalo, and then I think Indianapolis. I think Indianapolis becomes my third, and I think they have potential. I think, if you made me predict today, I think they would be a better team than Buffalo for next season with Wentz.
Their
I'm high on
defense
Wentz.
is their defense is way better. That's one thing that helps. They have a top 10 defense, while Buffalo they're probably like 20. They're probably like top 20, probably like in between 15 and 20. So yeah, if Wentz could just play like the, a top 12 quarterback in the league, then they're probably the second, they're probably at least the third. And I'd say if he were able to play up to that level, they'd probably be the second best team in the AFC behind the Chiefs. So
Yeah, I mean they've got, like you said about the defense, the Colts probably have the best offensive line in the league. They have
yeah,
a very solid, probably top 10 running game in the league as well, just because the offensive line is so good. And Taylor has had a good rookie year. We'll see how well he does in a sophomore, but that's so much better than the Bills. So if Wentz can be even close to what Allen is, and that's assuming Allen is again like an MVP candidate type of guy who's a top 5 quarterback in the league. If Wentz is if he's top 10, I mean, this team's going to be, the Colts may even just be the best team in the AFC. They might be better than the Chiefs.
I don't know if I'd say that, only because we really haven't seen Wentz in the playoffs. I mean, I know that they've been to the playoffs, but the year they won the Super Bowl, he wasn't playing. 2019, he got injured in the middle of that game, but they were still losing in that game. And then 2018, he led them to the playoffs, but he got injured, I think, the last week or two. And then Foles won that game against Chicago. So he really hasn't played in the playoffs that much. While if you were to put him against Kansas City, I'd still take Kansas City. I think you probably would too if they met in the playoffs. But I think they definitely have a shot at it. And if Wentz is playing his best since 2017, 2018, then they definitely have a real shot at beating Kansas City. But I'd still go Kansas City as the best team. And then right now, I'd still say Buffalo. But again, it depends on how Wentz plays. And then the Colts could easily be the second best team in the AFC.
Yeah, 100%. But Wentz wasn't the only move that happened since our last episode. J.J. Watt, he was released by the Texans. He hasn't signed with anybody yet, but there's been a number of teams, basically just the contenders in the league, that have wanted to potentially sign him. What team do you think signs Watt? Or, I mean, out of the front runners at least?
Well, it seems like the Browns are, at least like that's kind of what has been said so far, is that he's most likely going to go to the Browns. I think they were saying maybe the Packers, maybe the Steelers. Obviously his brothers play with the Steelers, but if you were to go to the Browns, and look, JJ Watt's obviously not the same guy that he was 3, 4, 5 years ago when he was winning Defensive Player of the Years. He could still be a solid veteran he may not even play every snap for your team, but he's obviously a really good pass rusher. He can come in on passing downs, and he's a professional, and he knows what to do, and he could still make some plays. But if you were to put him to a line like the Browns, where you have Myles Garrett, who could win Defensive Player of the Year any of these next 7 to 10 years, honestly, and you were to add him to that, and their defense last year was good, but it wasn't great, but it was good. If you add him, it makes a little bit of a difference, and you make some other additions. I think that'd be a great addition for them to get JJ Watt. And we talked about the Colts, the Bills, and the Chiefs. I mean, if the Browns make some additions and Baker improves a little bit, the Browns could easily be a top 5, probably like a top. Well, I guess they kind of are a top 5 team technically in the AFC, but like as a real contender, they could be, eyeing to be in like a championship game if they really wanted to. You there?
Hello.
Yeah.
How long? Whatever. Okay. My internet's being horrible, but yeah. My theory on the Browns is they're either interested. Well, I think they're interested regardless, right? But I'm not sure if Watt wants to go there, only because it is the Browns, and I'm not sure that they're like a Super Bowl contender. I think they're playoff contenders, but I still think they're a team that's most likely a first round exit unless you get a pretty solid first round matchup like they did last year. And as far as Watt is as a player, I think Watt is kind of similar to what Gronk is, probably a little bit better. I think he's just a better Gronk in terms of, just he can play sparingly throughout the season, use him when you need him. but your main goal is keep him healthy for the playoffs, and you hope that he just has a vintage JJ Watt game and a couple out of the few games in the playoffs, and he's a big reason of why you win a lot of playoff games. I'm not sure how many teams are actually genuinely interested in Watt and I'm not sure for what price it would be at. I'm not sure if Watt's concerned about the price or not. I think he's probably more just concerned about winning a ring. That's what my assumption would be.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like teams are actually all that interested. I'm not sure if Watt is using the Browns as like hey, like the Browns are interested in me. You other guys should start making offers before I go to the Browns. You shouldn't wait for, the salary cap or whatever. But it seems like, I'm not sure. If I had to guess a team that Watt goes to, I think he should go to the Packers. I think it's probably the safest call. I just think the Browns are just too risky. I don't think they're going to be as good as the Packers are next year. I think the Packers are, where he grew up at. The defense is pretty good. They need somebody like Watt. They would have loved to have somebody like Watt in that game in the NFC Championship. The offense is clearly, going to be great with Rodgers, Adams. You're still going to have MVS. And who knows what you get out of the draft, or maybe additionally in free agency to JJ Watt as well. I think the Packers are probably Watt's best choice. But yeah, we'll move on though. We'll move on to the NBA stuff. One team that's definitely struggled so far throughout the first 25-ish games of the season has been the Celtics, my favorite team. Who do you blame most for the struggles? I say probably right now it's Kemba. I mean, Kemba just hasn't played well. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but he's shot like under 40% from the field. I want to say like 36% from the field. He's shooting under that from three. He's just not good right now. I'm not sure if it's physically, if it's mentally. I'm not gonna say that I'm 100% sure it's just because of like a physical injury, and that once he's healthy, he's gonna be back to normal. I think there's a solid chance that Kemba is just absolutely cooked. He's basically a 6-foot guard. He's pretty light. This is like his 10th year in the league.
Yeah.
He's getting up there in age. I mean, guards like this, they don't just like last forever, right? I mean, Kemba's skill sets, he has to create separation. He has to be quick. He has to be agile. If he's not going to be able to do that with whether it be a knee injury or whatever, that's going to hamper him for the rest of his career, then he's going to essentially just have to be a very overpaid player on the Celtics team, unless they plan on trading him, which as of right now, if you're any team, are you really going to give up anything for Kemba Walker? I don't think you would. I mean, it's a very scary situation, similar to an Isaiah Thomas. When you see IT play when you see him just not play well compared to his MVP season, you're not going to go out there and pay anything for him. I'm not going to say that, Kemba is going to be out of the league in 1 year like IT was or anything like after his MVP type year. But yeah, I'm not sure what's happening to Kemba. I would assume I just think he's probably cooked. My hope is it's mental, right? And by the time the playoffs hit, he's 100% ready to go, and that he's back to his normal self, where he can, score maybe 20 a game, 18 a game, play make for this team, be their starting point guard, third best player on the team, and he can potentially make some shots in the playoffs that help them beat a Sixers or something like that, or a Nets, maybe, hopefully. But I'm not sure that they're going to do that. And if I had to predict that right now, I would say they probably don't. How good do I think the Celtics ceiling is this year? I mean, it's going to be completely reliant on Kemba. Like at this point, I know what I can get, at least from the first 25 games so far. I'm going to assume Tatum and Brown are going to be like this for the whole season. Ideally, I'd like to see Tatum make another jump like he did last year after the All-Star break, where he just went on the tear. And it seems like that's kind of what he is. If he can get even better than that, or if he can play like that one stretch that he had where he was just so good, that would be huge for them. Brown, I mean, he took a jump this season. I think he's played very well. He's played arguably like the best player on the team so far, and he's definitely better defensively than Tatum is, and he's putting up basically the same points per game on, I want to say, even slightly better efficiency. Yeah, it's going to be relying on Kemba. I mean, we know what the Celtics depth is. It's not great, but I mean, the Celtics ceiling isn't really relying on that. It's going to be completely relying on Kemba. If Kemba's the third best player on the team and he plays like how we thought he would when we signed him to that contract, or when we technically traded for him, or whatever you want to say, then I think this team can honestly compete with the Sixers. I think it can compete with the Nets. But I mean, it's going to be relying on Kemba, and this team's going to have to play great defensively and great offensively. So,
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think that Kemba is definitely the reason that this team has been, what they're 14-14 right now. So, I mean, that's the reason. And then also their ceiling. I think he's also the reason for that. If they can reach their ceiling, then it's going to come down to Kemba, and also Tatum taking a step. But I mean, Kemba, I mean, I have his stats right here. I mean, he's shooting 36% from the field and he's shooting 36% from three. So, I mean, he's basically not making any 2-point shots. I mean, really. And he's only averaging 16 points, which isn't enough. I think you need him to be at least 20. I mean, with Brown elevating, then he's probably 18 to 20, but it has to be more efficiently. And him not being Kemba, his normal self, has really hurt them because you signed Teague to be the guy, a backup point guard to Kemba who can come in defensively when you need him to, because obviously Kemba's not going to be playing late game situations when you need a stop, because he's just not a great defender. And that's why you have Teague. But with Kemba being injured, that means Teague has to play more. And it's clearly shown that he's just not good when he has to play in, bigger minutes or just play more time, or take shots or anything like that. And then there also hurts Tristan Thompson, who you signed to, you could have had Miles Turner. You could have had also Doug McDermott in a trade for Hayward, but you opted to not do that. You wanted to sign Tristan Thompson to be that big for you, but he's good in pick and rolls. And if Kemba's not healthy or he's not driving to the basket, and there's no pick and rolls for him to do. So he's kind of just sitting there looking for a rebound. He can't shoot from the outside. He can't ball handle. So the Kemba injuries affected all their offseason moves and really their team as a whole, because you're asking Tatum and Brown to do too much. I think they're good. I think they're really good. Obviously Tatum, like I don't, I hate on Tatum sometimes, but I mean, I'm not stupid. Obviously I know he's a top player in the league and he probably will be like a top 5 player if he reaches his ceiling, but they're being asked to do too much in this offense and for this whole team that I just don't think they could do without a third guy, which Kemba was supposed to be that guy, which
so
right now,
would you say that so you blame Kemba the most for the Celtics struggles so far? You blame him more than Ainge or Stevens, or
I blame Kemba because I think the moves they made in the offseason would be working right now if Kemba was healthy or if he was just playing better. I just think I think everyone's saying like, oh, the moves they made was terrible. Stevens doesn't know how to coach his team. Ainge, like he shouldn't have made those moves. He should have got Turner, McDermott. I just think that if Kemba was playing better, then those moves would look better, because then Teague and Thompson would be able to play their roles to an effective, style of play, which they're not doing right now because they're being asked to do something that they're not used to or that they weren't told that they were going to do when they signed up for the team, because Kemba's not playing as well as he should be. So I blame it on Kemba in the fact that, and again, it's not something that he could really control. He's clearly still, I don't know if he's still injured or if he's just not all the way back yet, but it's clearly something's wrong with him. So I guess I can't technically like blame him because it's clearly something injury related, but he just has to play better. And then I think everything will fall into place.
what would you do? What would you look to do right now if you're Ainge? I mean, I'm not sure what you look to do, but I mean, would you trade? Would you be trying to trade Kemba? Would you be trying to find more depth? Would you be trying to find another big man? What would you look to do?
Well, no one's going to trade for Kemba. I think at this point, he'd have to be like a salary dump, basically, which I don't think they're ready to do that yet. Maybe next year or something like that. But I think they have to get a big man. They have the $28.5 million trade exception from the Gordon Hayward trade to the Hornets, so they can trade for someone who's making $28.5 million or less this season, and one perfect fit for them. I think he's a perfect fit is Nikola Vucevic of the Magic. I mean, he's a 7-foot center who's, he's not great defensively, but he's good enough defensively. And then if you add him with Thompson, that's a pretty good defensive tandem when like you have either one of them on the court. But he can ball handle, he could shoot the three, he could spread the floor for Tatum and Brown. He can post up and he could get buckets against like an Embiid. I know you're going to face like a Jokic, he's in the West, but like a Jokic, like the big centers, the good centers, he can do that. And I think he's making 25 million or 24 million dollars this year, so he fits under that trade exception. The Magic are most likely trying to get rid of him only because they're kind of nowhere. Everyone's either injured or they're just going young, so what's the point of really having a guy who's making 25 million dollars on your team if you're not going anywhere? So I think he's the perfect fit. Someone else could be like a DeMar DeRozan. I don't think he really fits for them, but he's someone who's under that. other than that, there's not really other people that would make a huge impact on your team. So I would say Nikola Vucevic is probably like the perfect player for their team.
I think if you can give up like not a lot, I mean, I don't know how much you would really go for in the trade open trade market, but if you can give up not anything substantial, I think it's definitely something to go for. But I'm not giving up on anybody big, um, just for a shot at contending this year. I think you have to just hope that Kemba plays better because even if you trade for a Vucevic and Vucevic is awesome for you, you still need Kemba to play well regardless.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, like I mean, would I be willing to trade a Marcus Smart for maybe not whether it be a Vucevic or whoever? I probably would, but it has to be like a perfect deal for me. I mean, it has to be like it has to work out very well for me. But if not, then I'm not looking to trade just to trade, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, would you be willing? So, I mean, they still have that exception. I mean, would you still be willing to hold on to that exception and then go into the off season and then trade for somebody?
If there's not a trade I like that I think is perfect for this team right now, then I would say hold on to the trade exception and hope to get. I mean, you're not going to get a Bradley Beal, I don't think. I mean, the chances of that are very low, but I would hold on to the trade exception if there's not a trade that I'm in love with. And I'm not exactly sure what offers Danny Ainge is getting or what offers he's looking to get, but if there's not an offer that I'm 100% on board with that I think is like, I'm taking this for sure, then I'm just not going to trade anything and I'm just going to ride it out for this year.
Yeah. I mean, I think the perfect situation for them would be stick with the team that you have this year, maybe make like a small addition, but nothing that's going to shake your roster. See what happens this year, come back next year. You'd hope Kemba would be healthy. That'd be the main factor if Kemba could come back healthy, and then try and trade for Bradley Beal. If you can have Kemba, Beal, Brown, and Tatum as your top four players and a healthy Kemba, or at least like 90% healthy Kemba, then I mean that's one of the top teams in the league. Because again, Tatum's most likely going to make another step. Brown's, if he could still play like this, then he's a top 20 player in the NBA. Then you have Bradley Beal as a top 15 player in the NBA, or maybe even top 10. I'd say probably top 15. But I think that team's a really tough team in the playoffs. But again, do they even have enough pieces to get Bradley Beal in the offseason? Probably not. But he only has 1 year on his contract. He was best friends with Jason Tatum. He may force his way to Boston. Maybe, I don't know, but it's definitely something that if you don't think that Vucevic is enough this year to win the championship, then I think you have to wait till next year and try and get Bradley Beal. Because if you don't, then I just don't think your team's good enough. If even if Kemba comes back healthy, I still don't think the team's good enough in order to win a championship.
Essentially not. I think, I mean, if you had Vucevic and a healthy, solid, very good Kemba, I think you could compete. I think you'd need a couple breaks to go your way for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't think you would need something like Toronto where literally you get to the finals and the whole team's injured. I don't think you need that big of a break, but I do think you need a couple breaks along the way to get to a finals. But we'll move on. We'll talk about Drummond. So recently the Cavs just announced they're just not going to play Drummond and they're just going to trade him. I know Draymond Green had a couple things to say about it. He thought that it was just hypocritical of the league where, a player does that or whatever and they can get fined, whereas a team can do that easily and that's almost like good. I don't really care about that, but what teams do you think should want Drummond, or what team would you like to see Drummond go to? How good do you think he is?
Well, I think the perfect team would be the Nets. The only problem is I would say the money aspect of that, and that he's making $28.5 million. Now, I mean, if they don't trade him and maybe they cut him or something like that, then you'd obviously get him for cheaper. I just don't know if the Cavs would want to do that. They'd obviously rather just trade him and get his money off the books. But the Nets would be a perfect fit if they can get him, not for his $28.5 million salary for this year, but I mean, for how good he is, I think, the problem with him is that you can't play him in the last 4 minutes of a game, which is something that's going to be hard if, you have to trade for him and he's making $28 million and you can't even play for the last 4 minutes of a game. But I mean, he's good. He's good defensively. He's not great. He's not like Gobert or like Anthony Davis, but he's good enough where he could post other big man up like Embiid. I mean, if you're the Nets, you're going to face Embiid at some point, most likely. So having Drummond would be a lot better than having DeAndre Jordan, who is clearly past his prime, if he ever even had a prime, but is clearly past whatever he had. And you have no one else defensively. So at the center position and even on their whole team, but especially at the center position. So I would say that's the perfect team for him. But again, if you're trading for him, I just don't know if the Nets can even do that with how much salary that they have. So if it's not the Nets, then I'm not exactly sure who it is, but it would be perfect for the Celtics if he was under $28.5 million. And I don't know if he's the player that's an impact player like that, but that would be a pretty good addition if you had Drummond.
Yeah, if I'm the Celtics, I'm not really looking to acquire Drummond. I mean, I don't know. I think Vucevic is probably better, and I'm not sure what the difference in what you'd have to give up is. But if you made me pick between those for I'm giving up the same amount, I would pick Vucevic. I would assume Drummond would probably go for less, especially because everybody knows that Drummond has to be traded basically, and if he's not, he'll probably end up getting bought out.
And he's a free agent next year too. So yeah. I mean, like it's a rental anyways. So
yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I would say the Nets, yeah, but for 28, I mean, that's just a lot of money.
Yeah.
But I mean, it has to be a competing team, obviously. One, I mean, it's a rental. Two, it's Drummond. I mean, if you're not a competing team, what's the point in trading for somebody like Drummond? I mean, he's just not like a difference maker. He's just more of like again, like what Drummond, yes, he will help out for Embiid, but he's not going to play last 4 minutes of the game. He's not going to be the difference in you not competing and competing. Like, regardless, the Nets are still going to be competing for the finals. Now, will Drummond help you, with Embiid or with maybe an AD or something? Like, sure. But he's not going to be the difference between you, being a contender and not. So, like a team like the Celtics, I'm not trading for Drummond because at least not right now. But looking at the Western Conference, AD is out for, I want to say, at least 3 weeks, right?
Until he gets looked at again, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess my first question is, how far can LeBron take? I mean, how good does LeBron have? Like, I guess, I mean, right now they're the 2 seed, right? I want to say.
Yeah, the Jazz are the 1 seed.
If AD's out for 3 weeks, I think that's about 10 games. I mean,
you do get the All-Star break in there, which helps, but.
Yeah, I mean, how good do you think LeBron needs to be while AD is out? I mean, obviously, if you're the Lakers, you'd like to ideally get the 1 seed, but you don't want to fall down to like the 5 or the 6 seed by the time AD gets back.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and I also disagree in that I think they do have to kind of maintain that. I mean, look, if you look at the Western Conference, it's the Jazz 24-5, Lakers 22-7, Clippers 21-9, and then it's the Blazers, the Suns, the Spurs are still there, which I think they'll drop out, and then you have Denver, you still have Dallas all the way back down. So you have other teams that will most likely jump up, but it's those top 3 teams and the Jazz, Lakers, and Clippers. I mean, I'd assume with AD being out probably about 10 games, you're right. I'd say they probably drop to the 3 seed, maybe the 4 seed. I don't think they would, but if they go anywhere below 5, then I think it's definitely interesting because when AD comes back, if he comes back, he's not going to be healthy, and it's the same injury that Kevin Durant had. It looked like a torn Achilles, but it was really just a calf injury. But then as soon as KD came back, he tore his Achilles. So I wouldn't rush AD back at all. I'd make sure that he's completely healthy before playing him because we've clearly seen that if you play someone on a hurt calf or like a partial tear in their calf, whatever the exact injury is, they are more likely to tear their Achilles. It's just been proven by KD. So like I would definitely rest him until he's completely healthy. But for LeBron, I mean, I think for the regular season, I think he can not coast, but I think he could definitely rest more than he would have had to, which may sound weird, but I think it's like, all right, AD is not completely healthy. So I don't need to exert myself in the regular season as much right now because I know we'll still be at the minimum, a top 4 team in the West. And even if they're not, what were you going to say?
Well, I'm not playing LeBron more than like 36 a game. Ideally, I'd still like to keep LeBron in like the 34 minutes a game range. I'm not going to overexert LeBron just to try to stay in the 2 seed. If I have to fall down to the 3 seed or the 4 seed by the time AD comes back, I mean, you just have to take it. I'm not going to make LeBron and I'm not going to rush AD back clearly. And I'm not going to make LeBron just tired. There's just no point.
Yeah, and before, like, I think the Lakers they played like 3 overtime games in a row. Before that, LeBron was, I think, playing like 32 or 33 minutes a game. Now he's up to 35, but I think they now can kind of rest him more. I don't even think he's taken a game off yet. So he can definitely take more games off. They'll still be a top 4 seed. And we saw this with the Cavs 2018 team with LeBron. Like, I think they were a 4 seed or a 5 seed, and they played the Pacers in the first round that year, and he still made it to the finals. And I know it was the East, and he's now in the West, but he's clearly shown that if he's not the 1 or 2 seed, he can still make the finals. And you definitely wouldn't, if you're the Jazz or something like that, and you have to, and let's say the Lakers like the 4 seed. I mean, I'd pick in the second round. Obviously, they'd play most likely, so I definitely pick the Lakers in that series. If the Jazz were the 1 seed and the Lakers were the 4 or 5 seed, so I don't think it matters too much. But I think if they drop below the 5 seed, then it definitely is. It's definitely a little bit. I would be cautious because AD, again, if he returns, there's a likely chance he could tear his Achilles, or he just won't be healthy when the playoffs start. Because who knows what's going to happen with his leg. So it's definitely it's interesting right now, and it may turn into something later. But for right now, it's minor right now.
I think AD has to be at least 90% healthy for me to pick them over the Clippers.
Yeah.
I think those are, again, like I've said, those are the 2 best teams in the West. I still don't buy the Jazz as a top contender. I still throw them in with, again, like a Phoenix, a Portland, whatever, a Mavericks. I still throw them in that clump, even though right now they're the 1 seed. But if AD is not 100%, I think I probably pick the Clippers. I think I do.
I think I would too.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Clippers, I mean, they're 21-9. I don't think no one's really talking about them that much. I mean, right now, you could say, even if AD was healthy, if both teams were completely healthy, you could pick the Clippers over the Lakers in a series. And I don't think people may say like that's crazy because obviously the Lakers just won and the Clippers lost to the Nuggets or whatever. But I really like the Clippers. I think this year they're different than they were last year too. So
I would probably agree. I think Tyronn Lue's a better coach than Doc Rivers. I think Doc Rivers is overrated, but whatever. Yeah, no, I would agree. I just think people probably burnt out on the Clippers because it was all everybody talked about last year. Really was, that matchup. We never ended up getting it. It was because of the Clippers. I think people are burnt out on the Clippers, but I don't think people realize that they're just a different team than they were last year, and they're legitimate contenders, and they're probably the second best team in the league. And they're, in my opinion, they're at least the second best team in the league, if not the best, over the Lakers. I still have those teams as the 2 best in the league. I wouldn't put Philly. I wouldn't put Brooklyn. I wouldn't put them in the same category as them, frankly. Whatever team comes out of the West, I'm picking them over the team in the East right now, at least. Assuming it's one of the Los Angeles teams, yes.
Yeah, if it's the Lakers or Clippers, I'd probably pick them over any Eastern Conference team. The only team would be the Nets. If they could get someone defensively at center, whoever it is, or just be better defensively, then I'd probably go Nets over maybe both teams. But it maybe, I don't know. I had to see how they're playing when they come to meet. But yeah, it's the two teams in the West are the Lakers and the Clippers. And I'd say the 2 teams in the East, I'm not going to count the Bucks. I'm going to count the Sixers and the Nets. I think the Bucks, they're playing the same way they played last year. They haven't changed. And when they get to the playoffs, it's going to be the same exact thing. You build a wall against Giannis, and they can't do anything. So I can't unless they show.
At what point do you put Budenholzer on the hot seat?
If they go down in the second round this year, I think he has to be on the hot seat. I don't know if he get fired because they're most likely going to end up with the first or second best record in the East, but if they don't make it to the third round, what are the
conference finals?
Conference finals. I was thinking football. Conference finals. I think he really has to be in the hot seat because you have a top 5 player in the NBA. You have one of the best rosters in the NBA, and you've consistently had one of the best records in the NBA, and you can't get past the second round. It's that's a little bit. And Giannis just signed the contract, which he may regret it if they lose in the second round this year, and it's definitely possible they could because, again, they're playing the same exact way they've been playing the last 2 years, which is give the ball to Giannis, everyone space out, have him drive and then kick or drive and score or get fouled. It just doesn't work when it comes to the playoffs. So I don't know. They have to change their style of play for me to actually think of them as real contenders.
I would agree. I think if Budenholzer get them to the conference finals, I almost said the same thing again, but yeah, I would consider firing Budenholzer. And it's funny because I basically said the same thing about Bruce Arians this year, which was if they lose in the first round of the playoffs, or maybe even in the second, depending on who their opponent was, it was New Orleans. I wouldn't fire him if he lost to New Orleans, but I would have considered firing Arians as well. I mean, especially because you just saw how bad this team was and in the regular season. Frankly, it wasn't a great team in the regular season. They were 11-5. They were at best the third favorite in the NFC. So, and they probably had more talent than a lot of other teams in the NFC. They probably had more talent than like a Seahawks, like teams like that. But whatever. I would definitely consider firing Budenholzer if they don't perform to how well Giannis and this team should probably play. But yeah. I don't know if we will just get into baseball. Really only one thing's happened. It's the Tatis extension. Probably a top 10 player in baseball at this point. Signed, I want to say it was a 14-year, $300 million extension.
$340 million.
$340 million extension. Sorry. Obviously a huge payday. My first reaction to this was I feel horribly for Acuna and Albies.
Yeah.
I don't have their exact contracts on me right now, but it was something horrible.
I know Acuna. I think I know both of them. It's Acuna is 8 years, 90 million, and which means he'll be a free agent at 30 years old. Which again, you could still get paid at 30-year-old, but it's not going to be as much as if you were 25. And Albies is 7 years for I think it was 27 million, or maybe it was 5 years for 27 million. Whatever it was completely cheap. You know what I mean? So. Yeah.
And you understand why they would do that, like for the security, like sure, I get it, but I mean, people like Tatis, we just right after they signed those contracts, I think that was like the offseason. That was like the year before the Harper and Machado offseason, I want to say. That was before that. I could be wrong, but
I think that was the same one. I think Acuna's was done like right after the season ended, kind of, or maybe it was the middle of the winter.
Harper's was way in February or whatever that was.
Yeah,
but regardless, I just think, if they just held out for a year, even if they do like get a season-ending injury in a year, you're still getting a fat payday, like way more than what you'd get now. Yeah. So I just feel bad for those guys because they should have at least Acuna should be signing this 14-year, $350 million extension. He should be getting at least what Tatis got. Or at least close to it. Not 8 years, 90 million. That's just, and then if you're the Braves, you're like, wow. We just got, it's crazy. And
completely stole them.
Yeah, and you got two of them. Like, there's not even one of those contracts in the league. You got two of them on the same team. Yeah. It would be a shame if somehow the Braves don't take these two steals of contracts. And I think the expectation is you have to win a World Series with this team, right?
For the next, at least 7 years, 6 years. Yeah, because you have Acuna for what is it, like $12 million a year, whatever 8 and 90 is. He's a guy who should easily make $30 million a year. So yeah, you have to at least reach a World Series, but you really have to win one.
Yeah, you're a team that doesn't have the payroll of like a Dodgers or a Yankees or, I guess a Red Sox, but when you get contracts like these, you really don't have an excuse not to probably win a World Series. If I was a Braves fan, I would be highly disappointed and I would feel robbed if my team didn't win a World Series with these contracts.
Yeah.
But at least as far as Tatis's extension is concerned, there's really not too much to say about it. It's a contract extension that I think is good for both sides. Tatis gets paid. And if you're the Padres, you're locking up a top 10 player in baseball for the next 14 years. I forget exactly how old Tatis is.
I think he is 22 right now. So.
Okay. So, what's his contract right now? How long does that go on for?
They bought out his arbitration years. So like basically they're paying him $26 million per year for this contract. I think that's what the number was. So for the first 4 years, you're technically overpaying because his arbitration numbers would have been lower than that. But then for the next 10 years, I would say you're probably underpaying him at $26 million a year. So yeah. I would say it works out because the first 4 years he's probably going to be his best years, his first 4 or 5 years. so technically you're still overpaying him for that, but it's, I mean, $26 million for someone who could easily win MVP and is probably a top 10 player and could possibly be a top 5 player right now. So yeah, there was a no brainer for the contract. I thought it was gonna be $300 million. I didn't think it was gonna be 14 years. I thought it was gonna be like kind of like Manny's, whereas 10 years, 300 million, something around that. But 14 years for 340, I think it's a great contract for both sides.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, yeah, but yeah, there's really not too much to say about it other than that's a good contract.
And I mean, you thought of Acuna, I thought of Soto. I mean, what's he going to get paid? I know he's not as good defensively, athleticism. He doesn't play a premier position like shortstop, plays left field, but he's clearly he's one of the best hitters in baseball.
And the thing that Soto has going for him, and I guess it was a couple years ago at this point, technically, but he basically led a team to a World Series victory. I mean, he was the best player in that run, and he was like the youngest by far on that team, really. So
we'll have to see what he gets paid. I mean, I would assume it's pretty similar, if not. I don't know if it'd be more because again, he hasn't played premier position and he doesn't have the speed or defense, but it's going to be pretty similar.
Yeah, I think it'll be pretty similar. I mean, what did Harper get? 13,300?
He got 13 for 330.
13. I think it'll be, again, I mean, it's going to be around that. It's going to be 13, 330, 14, 340, 12, 320, 12, 300. It's going to be something around there.
And
I don't think it's going to be significantly less.
Yeah, and Soto's 22 right now. He turns 23 in October. So, and Harper was 26 when he signed that contract. So yeah, I would say he might get 400 million. I think he might.
There's a chance. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's basically it for this episode. There's not too much else we have to talk about, unless you have anything else to say. But
no, I think that was about it.
That's it. I appreciate everybody who stayed to the end. Unfortunately, we're here in the dorm or whatever. The weather's snowing outside, stuff like that. Weren't able to get to the podcast studio today, but we should be there for next episode. Cameras and everything should be fixed and all set up, so everything should look awesome. Stay tuned for potentially new logos and all that stuff for us as well. Everything should start to get into form here, but yeah, that's it. I appreciate everybody who stayed to the end. We'll be back Tuesday at noon.